Oh, we're back. Greetings. Are we live? We're live streaming this interview. People ask me sometimes, they say, Kenny, why don't you live stream the afternoon show anymore? What's become of the live stream? And at some point, we kind of stopped live streaming on social media because we want people to listen to the radio. But also this funny thing happened. We started getting censored on social media a lot for making bold claims about things like the pandemic or elections, for example. And at some point it occurred to me, there's information people need to hear, and social media websites shouldn't be they shouldn't be the ones to decide what you do and don't hear. So at any rate, this particular segment, to those of you listening to us right now or watching us on social media, if you're wondering why we haven't live streamed in a while, one of our live radio segments, and why we're doing it now, well, not surprisingly, it's a big information to share with you. If you're from Harris County, if you're from Houston, you probably remember last November, some really weird stuff happened here in our city. You know, last year was just a bizarre year in general, almost as strange as 2020. And on the day of the election in Harris County, almost as controversial on a national level as Maricopa County, a lot of people noticed, we ran out of polling. We ran out of paper ballots. Polling locations opened late. They closed early. There was one polling location where a person got electrocuted to death. They had to shut it down. Lawsuits were happening all day long. And somebody else noticed something. A lot of these irregularities, a lot of these problems that happened in Harris County last year on Election Day seemed to happen in parts of the city where it was mostly conservatives, right? It was mostly, Republican voters, conservative voters, right-leaning voters. It's probably not a coincidence that happened. We all know who Hollywood wanted to win the Harris County judge's race last year. That answer was pretty obvious, right? Hollywood wanted Lena Hidalgo to win. But poll after poll showed she was not the most popular candidate. The most popular candidate locally was Alexandra Del Moral Mueller, a good friend of this radio show. And because of, I don't want to jump ahead of us here in the interview or anything, but because of some stuff going on behind the scenes, some efforts to try to challenge what was going on, Alex hasn't been able to talk for months about what took place last November. She, I'll let her explain it to you right now, but today, she has finally decided to break her silence. So this is pretty big news. If you're somebody from Southeast Texas that cares about crime or poverty or property tax or any of the problems that affect average families, we invited Alex on the show today to discuss this with us. Alex, first of all, thanks so much for giving us some time today. It's always great to have you here. I'm very proud to have endorsed you. I'm proud to have supported your campaign last November. But to put it bluntly, I don't understand what happened, and nobody else does either. So why don't we start with that? What the heck happened last November?
Well, first, Kenny, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate that you were such an early adopter, and good to get some liberty-minded conservatives together. But the big question, what happened, that's sort of the whole point. There's not one official, or at the county or the state, that can say what happened. And so it's been extremely frustrating slogging it out all these months. Very expensive discovery process trying to sort through all these records, where meanwhile, Lena Hidalgo not only, being Hollywood's favorite, but because she is the incumbent, she has the full weight of government behind her, which means unlimited taxpayer-funded legal teams. And they've just been drowning us in documents, and this thing has just stalled out, and it's really ridiculous. You think about Maricopa, as you mentioned. Kari Lake's been through trial, through appeal, but back down again. And part of breaking it now is wanting to really draw attention that we've got our first trial coming up. Aaron Lunsford, reported count differential under 3,000 votes. And it's going to start here in just a few days. And so really trying to bring attention to everybody that, this whole election process, we're still slugging it out every day. And I was really happy this week to kind of bring in some muscle. Hired a very good attorney that actually helped me with an amicus brief on O'Donnell. So when I challenged the legal standing of the federal government coming in and creating this revolving door, so had this great track record and really trying to get everyone riled up because we're finally getting some progress. In a few weeks we'll be getting ready to depose Tatum. He no-showed the last one. But really trying to tell people it's like, okay, they've stalled it out, but we're finally getting close to trial. Come, be here with us. But the one, thing from the campaign was, such incredible support from everyone in Harris County, whereas all the law enforcement, people like yourself, that did everything. But when it came to outside Harris County, where I sit today, I am no better off than if it was Democrats controlling the state, because our state government is authorized to issue, to conduct a forensic audit. A lot of that same information, what polling locations were down, how long, that we're having to spend money, raise small dollars to try to review, they're already authorized to do it, and they just haven't gotten started. And so the Secretary of State, Jane Nelson, her title is actually Chief Election Officer. And, I kind of challenge anyone, try to find an instance where Jane's assuming that position has talked about election integrity or any of the issues in Harris County. What we've seen instead is European vacations, trade junkets. And here in Harris County, I really don't care if Jane, brings in some business from Germany. I want to know we have a free and fair election, because come 24, not only do we have a presidential race on the line, but we've got a U.S. Senate race. In Harris County, no matter which way it votes, we're the most Republicans in the state. We're just that big. And so to just turn your back and say, well, kind of sucks to be you all, is really unacceptable. And so as these trials start to progress, trying to make sure everyone knows that, hey, we actually are in a fight. We need your help. And, try to put pressure on the state to do its job. We know we can't seem to get the county to follow the law, but it would be nice at least if the Republican-controlled state would provide some oversight.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that. Governor Abbott came to town last year. Greg Abbott, very popular on a national level with Republicans, not necessarily as popular with grassroots activists in the Republican Party in his own state, came to town last year, did a lot of fundraising, went to River Oaks, went to Uptown, went to all the places with money. Did you get any help from Governor Abbott last November?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, very grateful. Ted Cruz helped me raise some money, was very supportive, but no coordination, discussion between any of those other campaigns. And, that's one choice if you don't want to support my candidacy, but it's a whole other thing to say you're not going to support free elections in Harris County.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. It's almost like on a statewide level, the Republican leadership just doesn't care about the biggest city, the biggest county in the state. And this was winnable, Alex. I mean, so many bizarre things happened last year, starting off with the primaries. Last year in the Democrat primaries, they lost 10,000 ballots. Isabella Longoria was the disgraced election czar. They replaced her, right? But before they you really got to wonder, obviously something weird happened in the general election that seemed to have benefited Lena Hidalgo. But if you look at the whole picture, it looks like something weird happened in the Democrat primaries that benefited Lena Hidalgo. Am I the only one that notices this?
Well, just this idea of these systematic failures. And it's funny, Commissioner Ramsey's recently been trying to push for them. They commissioned a report from Frost Marsh. So the consultants that the progressives actually picked to review the March primary, and they still won't release it, but actually Holly Hansen of the Texan released a draft of it. And essentially the gist of the report is that general disorganization and the inability for the election office to properly execute pre- and post-election procedures. So the whole point is we have an election code. The election code is the law. You should follow the law. And we've seen just kind of repeated disregard for any sort of the election procedures. And even the consultants they're cherry picking can't get away from that. And so I just don't know at what point is enough, that we say, there are laws on the books and you have to follow them.
Yeah, Holly actually just texted me seconds ago because I think she's watching this and said, I'd like to know more about the evidence that Nelson and SOS is not conducting the audit mandated by the state. Why? What's going on here?
Well, all that we've seen, we've been asking for months, just with various state office holders. Anyone know what's going on? So Dolcefino, through his FOIA request, was able to get an email that showed as of March, the Secretary of State's office, so, November election, so December, January, February, March, after these widespread issues that even the governor and the lieutenant governor said, hey, we've got a problem in Harris County, they still didn't even have the records at that point to even begin.
Yeah.
And so from my end is a lot of what we're trying to self-fund is something that should have all been taken care of by the audit. I shouldn't be having to pay money to try to figure out which locations were closed for how long, and then so first level is the county. They did this election administrator report, and it says, yeah, there was problems, but it's really he said, she said, and overall we think it's a success. And it would be nice for somebody in the government to go, and not just me having to rely on Jen Rice and the Chronicle, I don't know how many voters in Harris County feel like, all right, I feel good. Jen Rice says the elections are free and fair.
No.
To go and actually look at it. And so that's my point is I just, at this point, I want to know what happens. Obviously, I do think these issues, this repeated failure to follow the election code did make the true results unknowable. But even if you don't feel that way, I think we should all be able to agree we should know what happened. It shouldn't be a, kind of shoulder shrug. And so many of the issues that happened, those weren't things that was like a whoopsie. There's actually an election code that says how much paper to deliver. Why did you not follow that?
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be Tatum's best guess. So that's what's really exciting, at least about the lawsuit, is we have the ability to deposition and try to get those questions. And, to your listeners, basically, how I put it is every dollar we can raise, that's another chance we have to get a question answered. And so website's live at alexandramueller.com. And trying to keep this going because, I wish I had the resources that this county has to fight us. And that's why I'm asking the state to get involved because, you do have unlimited resources just like the county. Stop letting them bleed us dry and drag this out. The fact that our first trial is going to happen at the end of summer, 9 months later, what kind of remedy is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's address one of the things that some people have criticized you for is that you conceded too quickly and they thought that you didn't right when this happened, that you didn't respond quickly enough to point out something weird happened. How do you react to those critics?
No. And so, very fair. I know people kind of like the more bombastic personality. At that point, I didn't know enough to be able to kind of look friends and family, say, you know what, that changed the results. If people remember, my differential kind of the first day it reported was about 16,000. And you had the local Harris County party saying, we think 2,000 votes.
Yeah.
So it was just very difficult to make a statement when people on your same party are saying this is so big, it was 2,000. Now we all know it's much wider, right? Now you've got those same groups on Aaron Lunsford saying, hey, actually there's 18,000 votes that shouldn't even counted, and then a host of all of issues. But the initial reports, and that's why it's hard to try to make statements in the fog of war, it was like, hey, it's a few locations. And so at that point, the information I had was based on the reported results. And essentially then I waited, and I think it is helpful. So clearly a lot of people upset that I didn't file sooner. Equally as many people that'll probably never support me because I filed. So I wasn't trying to do this as what was the poll tested, was doing it based on the facts on the ground as I could see them. And what became very clear was there was no effort by the county to try to understand what happened. And so why I ended up filing that first week of January is that's when the election administrator report came out. And it's one of those times there's no life I've ever been so angry.
Yeah.
Is when I read that report and they said, he said, she said game, and it was a success.
That's it. Right.
And at that point, that's the gist. And I was like, and how can anyone pretend to say that's acceptable? And I even, remember the Chronicle's headline, no smoking gun here, just smoke it. It's like, no, but that's the point. You should know what happened. It shouldn't be smoky. This was a crucial election. And this idea that you can just kind of blunder your way through to the results you want. The kind of takeaway I have now is that their game they're playing, they want us to say, all right, here's this, it was just this one issue. And so then they try to defeat that. It's like, no, it's death by 1,000 cuts. These are close races, even from the legal ways that they're allowed to stack the field. Like the county administrative building downtown, that's where I used to vote. That's where the business class, kind of the office workers downtown votes. Been there for 30 years, was there in March. Come my general election, guess where it gets moved? It gets moved to a college campus, shut down.
Right.
Now, that's not allowed. You have to have a real reason. And now it's back as one of the locations, but that's like a huge voting location. And that's what Dolcefino's done a good job is, why even on its face, and it's in the EA's reports, did Ramsey have so many less polling sites, than Rodney Ellis? Ramsey's more spread out. That's your Tomball, your Cypress. Rodney Ellis is, dense urban concentration, and Ramsey has way more registered voters. So why would those not be equal?
Right. This is exactly what, aren't liberal Democrats the one always complaining about voter suppression? This felt like an obvious example of voter suppression, the same thing they've complained about for years. Here they are doing it. So that brings me to my next question, Alex. Now that you've gone through this, and this has cost you a lot of money, a lot of your time, this isn't just about your political career, of which, you never ran for office before this. It's not like your career didn't hinge on this. This was about trying to save Houston. What lessons have you learned now that you have gone through this? I mean, is this ever what you had expected? Everybody thought you were going to win. The day of the election, every weird thing that could happen happened, and now here we are months later talking about it.
Yeah, so I think, one point that is really sad just on reflecting is that I was much more trusting in elections prior to going through this experience than I am now. And I really thought my race was a race about persuasion, and you try to build support for your idea, and then people hear the arguments and they go out and vote. Then what you realize is this has really become a who, can have a machine to register and get out voters. I mean, even if you look in that election administrator report, in just 6 months, they registered 9,000 new voters. All of those are in heavy Democrat concentrated spots. They're not going to the VFW hall or the, whatever civic club trying to register voters. No, it's at high school campuses, college campuses, in the right geographies. And so if they're using county dollars to register 18,000 essentially Democrat voters, a day, using when they go and use these taxpayer funded various nonprofits to get more voters, and then using their busing system like Souls to the Polls. So those are the only days that, based on our predictive analytics, that actually lost early voting, was those 2 Sundays. That it's really who can drag your voters to the polls. It's not, hey, I'm an active citizen and I'd like to vote. And just seeing how much infrastructure, whether it's the Texas Organizing Project or the way that they use the teachers' unions against the Republicans, and there's nothing. And so I think one of the misnomers about my race, people often say, well, Alex, you ran a great campaign. If you can't win, Harris County is unwinnable. Like, no. The Democrats run as a unified front. There's a reason Biden can hide in the basement. The reason Lena could hide in the basement or between panic attacks she was having, it was because Ronnie Ellis' machine was working for her. He was everywhere. Sylvia Garcia, Sheila Jackson. I don't think anyone can think of a elected official that was really helping our effort to get out the vote. We were leading the charge in Harris County. And so as Kamala Harris and Jill Biden, all these people flew in and Hollywood dumped money in, Harris County, people like yourself did a tremendous job, but we had no support outside of Harris County. And everyone that was in an R+30 seat took their summer off, took the fall off to vacation, and they knew they got elected, but we lost all of these incredibly important races, all of the judges being included, by about 1 percentage point. We could have done a lot better, and it shouldn't have been close. It should have had enough to completely overwhelm the system.
All right, where do you think this lawsuit over the Harris County elections is going? I mean, obviously you're optimistic. That's why you're out doing media right now to talk about this. For the first time in months, we get to hear your voice publicly. You and I have kept in touch this whole time, but most people don't realize this fight is as alive as ever. It's not over. Mattress Mac's involved, Wayne Dolcefino, local conservative media is fighting for you. But what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, no, so, to be frank, and that's one of the ways that I think that this needs, there's a lot of the laws that need to change. It is a huge uphill battle. So I do think we have a shot, but it's certainly not a lock. It's kind of like we need to come out hitting. But I'm seeing enough, and we have barely made our way through discovery, where I feel very confident on the importance of proceeding. And I do think we have one of the strongest set of facts that anyone's ever had for an election contest. So at minimum, where this proceeds is that, I would like to raise as much funds as possible to do as fulsome of a discovery, be able to depose everyone, and just find some of these basic questions out. But certainly think it's a good use of time. I don't know what's more important than trying to fight for elections. And as you know, most don't. I probably spend a few hours a day on the lawsuit and have for the last few months. And part of it is just because it is litigation. Statements could be used against me that would be detrimental to the case. And so that was in respecting the importance of this case and wanting to be successful, where I did understand it was better to be quiet. But now as we're getting ready for trial, we need people to actually focus on it and demand answers. And if we can't get them all out in reasonable time through the lawsuit, I want people to know there's actually this other tool that's even better, that the state already has all the resources and should be deploying, and I just don't understand why they have it.
I mean, it's
I'm very
amazing,
excited
Alex.
to
I'm
see-
with you on that. Like, where is Governor Abbott? We know, frankly, it'd be great if we had an attorney general right now. Ken Paxton
Yeah.
is tied up; he can't do anything about it.
Or if our chief election officer had any interest in figuring out what happened in Harris County. So like a few less trade delegation junkets, and let's start putting resources to getting this audit done with haste.
Alex, we got a break here. We only have a minute left, but if you could just bottom line me, I mean, if people want to support you, I know that this lawsuit takes funding. This doesn't just happen. Every time you see some big controversial lawsuit on TV or the news, a lot of people, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and treasure went behind that. What can people do to support Alex Mueller right now?
Yes, please go to alexandramueller.com, donate what you can, and please share the videos we just pushed out today. They're on all my social media. And if, like I said, you can't afford to donate, then please go reach out to your elected officials, reach out to Secretary Jane Nelson, our chief election officer, and tell her to do her job, get down here, and let's get the audit done.
Alex Mueller. I do not regret supporting Alex Mueller. She was a fantastic candidate. She still is. Look, she's still fighting for Texas. She's still fighting for Houston. Houston and Harris County, this is the, Austin's the capital, sure, but this is the biggest city. This is the biggest county. And we know, they tell you over and over again, if Texas goes, so goes the nation. Well, a nice place to lead that charge, I think, would be Harris County. When crime happens in Houston, it bleeds to every other part of the country. Alexandra Mueller, find her online. Share this video if you can. We got to take a quick break. Alex, I appreciate your time so much today.
This is Pursuit of Happiness Radio.